Well, my next step in getting this workbench top ready is to do the center board. The bench itself is going to be a split top, so it's actually not going to have any space in between here. This space right down through here is going to be empty when it's actually mounted onto the legs and supports. And then what I have is a board. It's going to be a filler board that's actually going to sit down inside of that space, and when it's faced one way, it's going to be flush to the tabletop, and when you flip it over, it'll actually be proud, not by this much. This is about 1.25 inches over right now, but when it's done, it'll set up about maybe a 1/4 inch or so above the surface, and that's so you can flip it over and use it as a planing stop. So if you're planing boards, you can, shove the board up against the stop there, and then plane your boards. When you're done, you flip it back over. The other thing I'm going to do is actually have some spaces in the middle of the board that you can actually use to drop tools into. So chisels and things like that will slide into the middle. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to split this board. The whole space is going to be about 1.5 inches for the total width where this board's going to sit. And this is 6/4 walnut. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mill these down till they're about 1/2 inch, two boards. I'm going to split it into two boards 1/2 inch, and then I'll cut another 1/2 inch sections out to put in between to use as spacers, so that I get the, I'll put like maybe 3 or 4 of them in here so I can get those empty slots in between. So that's the plan. I originally intended to do this with a piece of cherry, and I went to resaw the cherry, and because I had some 5/4 cherry, I think. But when I did, what happened was, I've never actually had this happen this bad, that this board, I don't know if you can see it, it warped extremely bad. It's got this major curve that kind of runs down, whoop, and does this thing. So that is kind of off the table because I would lose so much wood by the time I plane that down. I said, you know what, it ain't worth it. Let me go out and get a piece of walnut. I like walnut anyway because it actually is a really nice contrast to this really kind of a light yellow southern yellow pine here. It's a really nice contrast. It'll make a nice accent piece for the top. So the first thing I'm going to do is joint this board, and then I'm going to run it through the planer to get two sides square, and then I'm going to split it. But I'm not going to split it on my table saw this time. This time I'm going to do it on my table saw. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it on my bandsaw this time. I'm going to do it on the table saw. And I know you lose a little bit of wood that way, but I don't want to take a chance on this one warping like the other one did, and not at $10 and some odd cents a board foot. I think I'll lose 1/8 of an inch out of the middle of the board to make sure that they stay straight. So time to start jointing these, and let's get this middle part done. So that last pass, what I did was I actually raised the bed up just a hair, and what that does is it lowers the cutting blades so that I'm not taking as deep a cut. And so I just wanted to get a really fine skim across here and clean up this edge. So now I've got two squared up edges here, and I'm ready to go to the planer. And this thing has some really nice figure in it. It wasn't in the figured walnut pile, but it actually does have some nice figure in it. So this is going to look really nice when it's done. All right, on to the planer. All right, so now I've got a board that is square on 3 sides. I've got this face square to this face and this face. And now I just have to go to the table saw and split it down this way. Then I'm going to flip it on end like this, run it through the table saw, split my pieces apart, run them through the planer one more time just to clean off the saw surface. and I should be good to go on the tabletop. I'll just have to cut the length and then cut out the notches where it'll fit over the table supports. But that's pretty much where it is on this one. Hey, and if you want to see the video on where I talk about this in-feed out-feed table for my planer, check out the video link right here. Alright, let's go ahead and get these on the table saw, get them cut down to some length or some width, and then we'll split them down the middle and then run through the planer one more time, and we should be in good shape. Alright, let's go. Alright, so this board right here basically represents the thickness of my tabletop, and it's a little over 3.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is take this board, which is the walnut that I just milled up, and I'm going to trim it down lengthwise so that it is about, I don't know, about a ½ an inch more. So I'm going to make this one 4 inches right here. It'll sit a little bit proud of this one. That way I can chop out a little bit to sit over the supports, and when it's flipped upside down, or right side up, it'll actually fit over the supports and be flush with this board right here, so it'll look like that. When I flip it around, it'll rest on top of the supports because they'll kind of be offset from the length of the table, so they're not going to be equidistant from each side. So when I do that, I'll have a little bit of a planing stop. It'll look like that. So now I just need to cut these boards down to about 4 inches. They start off at about 5 inches, so I'm just going to trim about 1 inch off the bottom of them, and then I'll split them down, and we'll get moving on this thing. So the one thing I need to be sure to do is reference this face off of the table saw fence, because this is the one that I actually milled up on the joiner along with this flat face right here. So when I put it like this, that'll give me 1 square cut. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to make sure that I'm actually getting a square cut by raising my fence up and putting my angle finder on there just to make sure I'm getting a nice 90-degree cut on there, because I would hate to have a slight angle on here and then that would throw everything off because I'd have a bevel. So I'm going to set this on here, turn it on, I'm going to zero it out, okay, and then I'm going to put it on the face of my thing, and I'm at 89.8, so let me see if I can get that just perfect here. There's 90 right there. So now I'm perfect, so I won't, well, it says that. Now it went back to 89.7. So let me ratchet back just a hair. Right there. These things are really touchy, but I'd rather have it perfect and have a nice square cut than be off by 1/3 of a degree. So anyway, all right, so that's good. Now I'm going to lower it back down, and that's actually going to be really important when I go to resaw these boards, because when I resaw it, I'm going to have this blade up a little bit more than halfway, so I'm going to be running this through that saw blade, and I want that perfectly straight up and down. I don't want an angled cut because it'll be magnified. The further away it gets from the table surface, the more that angle gets magnified. So if it's not perfectly perpendicular to that table, it'll show up when you resaw. So it's really important to use that angle or use a square or something, put it up against there, and make sure that you're getting a perfect 90-degree cut in your wood before you do any resawing or squaring up your boards. Alright, so now I just need to measure out 4 inches and then get this thing done. Need some ears. Where's my ears? Dang it. Okay, so there's the short one. I've got one long one to do. This one is actually going to, this one's going to be split down the middle just like everything else. I've been doing the exact same things to this board that I've done to the longer one, but this one is actually going to be split into smaller pieces and become the spacers for the dividers where I'm going to have the tool slots going in between that board. That's why I've been chasing this one. I also use this one as my entry and exit board when I was planing, just so that if I got any snipe, it would be on this board and not the long board. So it's always good to have an extra one that is the exact same dimension to test your cuts on and to eliminate snipe by feeding it in and out on a planer. So anyway, let's go ahead and get set up for the long board. I'm going to go ahead and put my, my roller bar at the end here just to catch that board coming off because it's pretty long. But this looks pretty good, so time to do the next one. Alright, you can see, probably maybe not, that I've got a little burning on here from the saw blade. And that's probably because my blade is a little bit dull and I probably need to either sharpen it or get a new one. So really what I have to do is slow that rate of feed down so that the saw can get the cut done. But by slowing it down, that's where you get the burn. If I had a brand new ripping saw on here, I would be flying through these boards. But I kind of make do with what I got for right now. So let's go ahead, we'll keep it slow, and if I get any burns, I'll just hit those with a card scraper and some sandpaper and it'll be fine. Yeah, you can see the burn on there. It's definitely time to get a new saw blade. But anyway, this is done, so now what I have to do is flip this up on the end and raise the saw blade up to a little over halfway and then run it through, and that'll be that. All right, let's try that. Okay, so I went halfway through. So I'm at 1 and let's see, what do we got? 5/16. So need to go 30 seconds there. If I said 1 1/4, that'd be a lot easier, wouldn't it? So I could take 1 1/4, but then my boards wouldn't be the same. But they would be when I plane them. Now 1 and 5/16. So okay, so I measured the width of the board and then came out with, I added in the, took it from the middle, added a 1/16 to that, and came out with 23/32 to this side of my blade, to the outboard side. So it was just an easier way for me to measure the fence. And I've decided, instead of actually taking this board and cutting it all the way through this way and then all the way through, flipping it over and cutting it the other side, I'm going to take a little less than half. I'm going to run this a little bit, so there'll be a little bit of meat left in the middle, and then what I'm going to do is run that through the bandsaw, and that should actually separate it down pretty easily, and that way it just doesn't put as much strain on the table saw cutting through that much wood. So we'll see how that goes. I've got my one piece here, which is always good because it's kind of like my test piece. So this is a short one. We'll try it on there before we move to the big one, but I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to just basically cut a little bit into this side and this side, and that way when I put it on the bandsaw and run it through, I've got a nice big 3/4 inch blade, and it should have no problem taking that rest of that piece out and hopefully not getting any warping in the board as I do that. So alright, let's give that a shot. Okay, I definitely know that I need to go get a new saw blade because that was really super slow. I mean, it took me a long time at a slow pace to get through that board. And you can see I didn't even go all the way through it. You can see that I'm kind of like, maybe, I don't know, less than half by about a quarter of an inch. I think I'm gonna do this process this way. I kind of like it, but I'm definitely gonna go get a new saw blade in a few minutes before I start cutting on the big board because I really don't want to screw it up at this point in time. This wood is too expensive to risk it on a dull saw blade. So, all right, I'm gonna take this over to the bandsaw and finish cutting it up. Hopefully that will that'll look awesome when it's done. And then I'll take a little break, run up to the hardware store, buy me a new saw blade, put it in here, and see if we can't do the exact same thing on the larger board. So let's flip the camera around, get it on the table saw. I'll show you that, and then we'll finish this up. All right, well you can see here that that did a pretty good job of knocking that little center kerf area out there. You can see it right here on this one. I kind of just rode that I rode the saw blade between those two cuts on the bandsaw, and that did a really nice job. I can either take this down on the planer or the jointer, but I'm probably gonna do it on the planer because I already have one side that's nice and flat. So I'll reference that on the planer, knock this down, and get these at the same height, and then I'll have two good boards. So I like that, but I do need that new saw blade. So you won't know it, but I'll be gone for a little while. Hang tight. All right, so I just picked this up from my local Home Depot, and it's a ripping saw. So what you'll see, just really quickly, is that two things. One, you can see that this is the blade I was using. It's an Irwin Marples blade. It's not bad, it's a pretty good blade, but it's got some wear on there, and these teeth are pretty close together. This is a hybrid, I think it's like 50 teeth, something around there. So it's great for cross-cutting and stuff, but for doing things like ripping, not as great. I mean, you've got some deep gullets in here. These deep gullets kind of help clear, they clear some of the dust and stuff out, but I think part of it is it binds it up. The other thing is it probably needs to be sharpened a little bit and degummed. This is a ripping blade. You can see it has much fewer teeth. So there's teeth here, here, and here, as opposed to that many. There's only 24 teeth on here. So at 24 teeth, it has fewer teeth going into the wood, but it also has more space to clean all the wood out. So the other big difference, and I don't think you'll be able to see this, but let me get in here really tight and see if you can see the difference here. Okay. So what you've got is right here, there we go. This is a much thinner kerf than this. So thinner kerf means it goes through the wood a little easier, and the only difference is that I have to kind of remeasure a little bit, and I don't have as much. But the nice thing is that you don't lose as much of your wood when you're doing rips or you're doing resawing, because that thin kerf is taking a lot less wood out. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put this one in, and then we'll try doing some resawing on that bigger board. Wow, that was a lot more dust than I was expecting. It's kind of like a little walnut volcano going on there, but the cut itself is really nice. So just a nice cleanup on the planer, and this board is ready to use. That's awesome. All right, let's get this thing squared up and planed here. This is nice. All right, so what I did was I took one of the center pieces off the cutoffs here and made the full thickness of this center board now. So they're all, each one of these little pieces is 1/2 inch thick. You can see there's a big slot that goes down the middle, and then I've got another one down there finishing off the 1.5 inch. I haven't figured out, I'm going to have 2 or 3 more spacers in between those two, but I haven't figured out where they're going to go yet because they are dependent upon where I actually put my leg bracing. So you can see my legs. I actually put a set on here. Let me pull back so you can see a little bit. So I put a set on here, so now I can figure this out. So what I have to do now is just figure out the cross brace that's going to run from this leg to this leg, and it's going to sit here and support the table across the width, and then this will actually be recessed so that it fits over that cross brace. So I just have to figure out now how wide that's going to be, and then do a little mortise and tenon action on the legs here to get that fit in there. So that will be the next step. So stay tuned.